our various delivery methods. This time, we're moving on to this idea of impromptu speaking, and you guys are probably pretty familiar whenever it comes to this one. It is very popular, especially whenever it comes to if you're interested in drama or theater. This is considered technically a spontaneous speech given without more than a few minutes of advanced preparation. Now, this is probably the most performed form of public speaking. And the reason why I say this is because obviously, on a day to day basis, we are using impromptu speaking in our conversations, whether it's individually or whether it's in groups, at church, among friends. And so, this is something where we're used to doing, except having to be a little bit more spontaneous. So, whenever you're called on to pray or to share your testimony, or if I call you up in front of the class and say, hey, will you do this? That's a form of impromptu speaking. So in all of these scenarios, you'll need to learn how to communicate and present your ideas in a concise and logical way. Because a lot of the times, whenever it comes to impromptu, whenever we're put on the spot, our nerves will really just start to scramble around in our head, and our minds go blank, and that when that anxiety shoots up. And so whenever we're in that impromptu speaking, understand that it is a skill that requires practice. And with that practice, we are able to think more quickly and readily on our feet, and we're able to communicate in a more concise, logical manner. Now, probably for at least for me, for my generation, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Whose Line Is It Anyway, but they are probably one of the most popular shows from when I was growing up as far as this idea of impromptu. And it's a show that basically thrives on impromptu practices. So here's the thing, using a podium, that's something that you can, that you can prepare for and expect. Now, here's the big rule, and you guys know I'm huge and adamant on this. Yes, you can use the podium for notes, but don't you ever, ever, ever touch that podium. Why? Because once you actually touch that podium, it is going to be your safety blanket, and you are not going to want to get away from that. And so basically, I don't want you guys to feel confined to that podium. All right, it is not a safety blanket. All it is a place for you to put your notes or to put any visual aids, and you walk away from that thing. You take a step back. I don't want you hugging on to that thing. All right, other things is using a microphone. We've already talked about that. All right, using visual aids. This is also something else that you need to be able to deal with. And so these are used when a message needs to be reinforced, or when a verbal explanation is not going to be sufficient enough to effectively communicate your content. Now, I will say this with visual aids is it is very important that you consider your visual aids depending on your scenario. And we've talked about this before too, as far as, all right, are your visual aids visible? Do you have a video that's projecting your visual aids? If it's a small visual aids, are you making it visible to the camera? Are you walking around to your audience who is, and letting them see and showing it to them as you're continuing to speak? You don't stop to show a visual aid. Continue to speak through it. All right, you don't want to pause and lose that time. Oh, let me go back here. So whenever it comes to visual aids, guys, and we'll go into this in a little bit, because we're going to be virtual, you really need to be able to think through your visual aids. Now, I know a lot of you guys would probably lean on presentations and whatnot, and I'm okay if you use a presentation. However, remember is that one of the biggest things whenever it comes to formal speaking is me actually grading your delivery, your facial expressions and things like that. So if you're going to give a presentation, you need to make sure that you're also able to visually record yourself in addition to that presentation. So if we're following along on screen with the presentation, there should be a little box that actually shows you, so that I can watch you guys and so that we can watch you guys as you're delivering. You guys know this already as far as visual aids can be incredibly beneficial, especially whenever it comes to explaining a process. It can just help make sense of things. Uh, Obviously, like I said before, it needs to be properly prepared and presented. And here's the thing, guys, don't just have a visual aid just to check mark a box. Make sure it's actually applicable to your presentation and enhances your presentation. So it needs to, we've discussed this, is it necessary to the speech? Is it clear enough to see? Here's the big thing. If you're going to be using a visual, try to keep it out of sight. That scenario where it's out of sight, out of mind. That's kind of what you're going for. Don't talk to it. A lot of people will either don't talk to your presentation, and don't talk to your visual. All right. You still want to connect with your audience, and you want to be able to get that feedback from the audience, and you can't do that if your gaze is focused on this visual aid and you're not really talking to your audience. Then you're talking to your visual aid. All right, and we'll begin here in the next video.